Well, good morning from sunny Florida. We have birds flying overhead, chirping.
It's all good.
Puppy dog over here just looking at us.
Yeah, looks like it's going to be another beautiful day in South Florida. We hope it's beautiful where you're at, and that you're enjoying your Monday. Hey, happy Monday! It's good to be with you again. I hope you had an awesome weekend.
Good morning, Tina. Saw you on there already, brighten, smiling, waving already. Be sure to give us a shout out. Let us know where you're listening from, what we can be in prayer for you about. We actually got some good news. I think today, officially, good morning, Donna. Yay! That's Mama. Hello, Mama.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Like the football players. Hey, Mom.
Yeah,
right?
What were you going to say?
We got good news. Our state is beginning to open up a little bit, just a smidgen. Restaurants are opening back up to a 25% capacity, so that's a good thing.
As of today.
Yeah.
We're going to try to go get us some dinner someplace.
Yeah, go support one of our local restaurants and have some fun maybe with some friends. But all that to say, we have had quite the season. I think everybody has went through a metamorphosis of emotions, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes, maybe not so much. No, I think there's been a lot of different things to feel during this season, and I think that there's things that we have to feel in any given season. You know, it's just like the circumstances change, and that's all the more reason why we really need to be grounded in sort of our principles of faith.
Yep.
What we know are the basic plays that we need to run that help us to feel successful and feel at peace.
Yep.
No matter what the storms that are blowing, you know, as we peek outside or we walk outside our door. You know, there's always a lot of different things that can throw us off our square. If we're not really grounded and we don't really understand who we are, and maybe more importantly, whose we are. Ooh. So we want to talk with you just a little bit this morning about defining success. And I think that if you ask 100 different people how they might define success, you'd probably get 100 different answers, wouldn't you, love?
Yeah.
You really would. But I think that there are probably some commonalities and some things that, at least that Julie and I have learned over the years, that really help keep us grounded, and that in times where maybe we begin to feel like we're unsuccessful, there's usually some telltale things that we're doing that are not
some
good.
weights that we've picked up
right?
that we shouldn't. Yep.
That would cause us not to feel successful. And I think there's just a lot of times there's a lot of different things that play into it that are not necessarily good habits. And so it's always good to understand and ground ourselves in what are the good habits and what is the best way to really define success, particularly those of us who share the faith of having Christ at the center of our lives and our decision making, and really, after all, who is it that defines our success? I know.
Yeah, it makes me think of actually a story. You know, it was probably about 15, maybe 18 years ago.
Yeah, it's probably been at least 18 years.
God really challenged me and put a lesson in our heart that has stuck with us, and in seasons where we feel like we're being shaken, we come back to. And it was back in Louisville, Kentucky. God had just called me out of corporate America, asked me to do the work of an evangelist. Problem was, nobody was knocking on my door, or, you know, asking us to come speak.
We didn't have any books,
no Facebook Lives even to be able to share the message forward. And so
we didn't even know what Facebook was, did we?
Yeah, no, we didn't. I don't think so. And God began to put on our hearts, though, to share our testimony with 1,000 people. And I remember thinking, woohoo, right? But the problem was there was no outlet to do that. And so we began to pray about it, and God gave this incredible strategy to share our testimony with 1,000 people. And so he filled our mind with this idea of taking a white piece of paper, writing our script as far
testimony.
as testimony.
Wrote your story on there, just a really brief kind of outline of
what God had done in my life.
Yeah, exactly. And
We got the blessing from our pastor, from our small group. Everybody was praying. Everybody was bought into it and gave us this idea. We would fold up this 8 by 10 sheet of paper and put it in mailboxes all across Louisville, Kentucky. And so everybody was praying about it. We were excited. And I remember we started putting them in mailboxes. We're praying over every house thinking, this is awesome. There's going to be citywide evangelism. And
yeah, but there's a piece of the story
And-
that you're leaving out that I think is kind of key. This was in the dead middle of winter in Louisville, Kentucky. We had an ice storm and a snowstorm.
And that set in about midway through of putting these flyers.
Yeah, so it is frigid outside. I mean, cold, right? And we're driving along and we're, bouncing across, zigzagging across the streets, shoving these testimonials, with our contact information in our church, and their contact information and sticking them in the, and I was freezing my tater off. I'm just saying.
We were so excited, and then about midway through, it was like, this is the stupidest idea we have ever had. And then about 990 again, we start getting our sanctity back and thinking, okay, God bless it. And anyway, fast forward, we were convinced that God would take that single testimony because we were being obedient, we were following his lead to have citywide evangelism. And so the very first week, because we had put the church's address, we thought somebody would show up. Of course,
We thought maybe at least a 10% return, right? Maybe
Somebody
there'd be
would
100 people that would show up out of 1,000 flyers we put in there, and we'd have 100 people growth in the church that weekend, right?
yep,
However,
not so much. So 1 week went by, another week went by. By the fourth week, not one single return call, not one email, nobody showing up at the church. And what started out as excitement became really embarrassing. And I remember going to prayer and I thought, oh my goodness, everybody in my cell group, our entire church, our pastor knew all about this. And we miss God. I miss God. And I remember going to prayer and saying, God, I am so sorry. Here I've attributed your name to something you obviously never called us to.
right?
And I'll never forget it. We'll never forget it. God gave this one-liner. He said, Julie, I never called you to be successful. I called you to be obedient. Well done. And it was in that place that the measuring stick, see, we measured success by numbers. We measured success by the outcome that we had anticipated. But the way that God measured it, his measuring stick, was simply that of obedience.
I think it's a good word. We can get so caught up in, we're type A personalities. We like to measure things. We find value in measuring things. In fact, I'm not trying to convince you that you shouldn't measure things. I think you should, right? Because that's how we grow, and that's how we learn how to dial in what it is that we're doing to produce a particular result. But I think that the important key there that we learned, and unfortunately we've had to learn it a couple of times throughout our journey, but for you in your personal application as you're pondering, okay, what gets me undone when I think that I'm being successful or not being successful, right? It is staying obedient first and foremost, right? So if we've been obedient, then in God's eyes we've done what he's asked us to do, and you did what God asked you to do. I did what God asked us to do in that day. But when we start comparing, for example,
Yep.
I know one of the things that'll throw me off track every single time is when I begin to compare my results with somebody else's results. And either in the positive or the negative, I don't think it's necessarily a healthy thing, right? Because if I feel like I've outdone someone, then it's maybe it's an unhealthy competitive spirit.
Yep.
Likewise, in the opposite, sometimes I feel defeated because maybe I didn't do as much as someone else did. But I think that the primary thing that we took away there was just to be obedient.
Yeah, God's measurement for success is obedience. And so If we start feeling like we're not living fully in the joy, I think right now what God has been trying to shake from us as a nation, as a people, as a country, as a world, is he's drawn us into this place of trust and abandonment to him. So letting go of worldly measurements for success, whether that's numbers or dollars or whatever, as far as a prestige kind of position, and simply obeying him. I think the other thing is if we feel like we're failing or we're not measuring up to the standards, like you said, in our own mind, that can. So it impresses the importance of understanding that just because God calls us to something doesn't mean it's going to be easy, or that it's always going to turn out the way that we think it should turn out. Like his idea for us, I look back at that season, and what he was really teaching was something that would carry with us that was so much better than even world or citywide evangelism at that time. It was the place where we could walk in freedom and in abandoned trust to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, one of the notes that we had talked about earlier is that sometimes the underpinning of what it is that undoes us and causes us to feel unsuccessful is pride. And, if we've not been obedient, or we've been disobedient, or we've not done what we feel like God has spoken in our spirit that we need to do, then clearly, there's reason for self-reflection there.
Sure.
that should call us to action. But I think, again, that all too often, a lot of times, if I'm feeling undone, there is an underpinning in there of pride, that maybe sometimes pride has kept me from being obedient to God. Have you ever experienced that personally, you think?
Oh, I think that, like, anytime that I get busy in my own mind, and I want to do great things for God, but God doesn't require me to do great things. He as just like a parent, he wants me to be calm. He wants me to enjoy life. I can remember so many different seasons where it was like, baby girl, just embrace this process and have fun. One thing that I realize as I'm now over the 50 mark is just how fleeting life is, how quickly it goes. And I want to be in a place of rest and abandoned trust where I can fully enjoy my time with you, fully enjoy my time with my kids, and understand that God's just not all that impressed with anything that I can accomplish for him.
Ooh, that's a good point. Yeah, because he really doesn't need us
To do anything.
It which is a great reminder, I think, because it centers us again on the purpose of what it is that we do in being guided by the Holy Spirit. I think the other thing too that can happen when we have a kind of a misaligned mindset is it can really cause us then to have a fear of failure, which will cause us not to step out. And fear of failure, quite honestly, if I'm being straight with you, has caused me many times actually to miss many opportunities. And I think, to be honest with you, it's caused me to be disobedient at different times as well. And so it's a great reminder, again, just to be grounded in the importance of just simply being obedient. And we've got a good mentor friend that says jump and build your wings on the way down, and it doesn't mean to be reckless. It just means that doing something's better than doing nothing. It really is. We learn as we go forward. We learned some things by tightening and putting that testimony on one sheet of paper. So there was a lot of different things that we took from that other than this core lesson. There were things that we learned that we would use later on in order to build one sheets, in order to learn. It was the early days of really learning how to promote ourselves and create like a bio and things of that nature that might be used. So there was a lot of fruit from it. So don't let fear of failure hold you back.
Yep. It's a simple step of obedience. So as far as for your marriage relationship, what is it that God's calling you to as a couple? What is it that he wants you to, in this season, put your hand to? There's nothing too big that it's impossible, and there's nothing so minute that it's not important that God wouldn't be involved with. Like, he sees it all from beginning to end. And I believe what God is wanting for each one of us to do as couples, as families, is to slow down the pace, to simply, again, position ourselves with those questions we've been giving you throughout these Facebook Lives of God. Who are you? First of all, let my mind be steady and steadfast there of who you are. What is it that you are calling us to? Who do you say that we are, right? Who are we as a family, and how do we live into that? How do we walk in that joy and that freedom, walking it out in peace, not with a measurement that the world would say, but in the measurement of God? Who is it that you're calling us to, so that we can walk in that complete freedom and not have the comparisons? And the other thing in all of that is then trusting Him. Trusting Him with the results of, what do you have to say about our circumstances right now? What are you trying to teach us, instead of why is all this happening? And being in that place of abandonment for us has brought us great joy, a freedom to step out to do some pretty audacious things, because what we realize is it's not about us. When you think about restoring, like, God has given us some promises, and I want to encourage you, go to our website. Pray for us. Would you please pray for us? Because the things that God's calling us to, He has promised us that we would be part of a movement that would reduce the divorce rate 40% in our lifetime. Now, if we thought that had anything to do with us, I can tell you, if we thought it was about us being able to measure that success even, we would be stopped in our tracks. But by simply welcoming it and walking towards it, releasing the outcome, it allows us to walk in those steps of abandonment and joy, and enjoying the process.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about releasing the outcome. Somebody maybe not familiar with that, I know, hear the birds, not familiar with that particular vernacular, or what are we talking about when we say, releasing the outcome? It means really resting in God's provision. Here's the thing, and His faithfulness, by the way. What just because we're obedient and we're faithful does not preclude us or keep us from having trials.
Right.
I think a lot of times people will think, well, that must have not have been God's voice, because this has been really difficult. Listen, if you think, embarking on a journey with Him, or with anybody else for that matter, of reducing the divorce rate by 40% is, it doesn't come without trials and challenges, you're crazy. Because I promise you, it comes with challenges and trials every single day. So I just want to encourage you, somebody out there may be at a place where they're like, well, I tried, but then it didn't go well, and it felt like the whole world. Listen, that doesn't necessarily mean, look, the Israelites wandered around in the in the wilderness for 40 years before they went into the promised land. And some of that, true enough, was lack of obedience on their part, and but a lot of it too was a training ground. And I think that sometimes the resistance that we feel is the training ground that actually helps bring us into the next level as well.
Well, and you think about the children, when they came out of the wilderness, they actually had more battles from the time they entered into that promised land. And it goes back to last week, right?
There's a thunk for you.
They had to go. They had to take the land. And God gave it to them, as we shared last week, little by little. And it wasn't because He was trying to hold back the promises. It wasn't because He was trying to restrain the blessing.
Yeah.
It was because He was conditioning them. He was preparing them. He was strengthening them so that the beasts of the field didn't overcome them. And so in all of that, I think that's really great to remember, Greg, that when God gives us a promise, we participate, but then, as you were saying, we release the outcome to Him.
Give it to Him, yeah. And in that, one of the things that we've learned is really resting in whatever that outcome is. If we're being obedient, if we are trusting Him, if we're seeking Him, and we're doing what we feel like we're supposed to be doing, okay, then really we have to choose to trust the fact that whatever the outcome is, that He's at work in it. There's a song that says that even when we can't see it, even when we can't feel it, He's working. And that He never stops working. And I think sometimes we can't always see immediately exactly what it is that he's doing, but he is leading us someplace. He is the consummate leader, the consummate father, and so he's taking us someplace. So
Yeah.
it doesn't always mean, that when we step out to be faithful,
Yep.
that we're going to have immediate success, right, love?
Right.
Which is kind of, again, pointing back to the Israelites and 100 different stories in the Bible and 100 different stories in our own lives that sometimes it feels like our success is delayed, but it's actually not. It's always in His perfect timing.
So I read a quote this morning, and I wrote it down here, which is why I have this sheet of paper. It says, Oswald Chambers said, "Faith never knows where it's being led, but it loves and knows the one who is leading." I think about Abraham and how Abraham set out not knowing where he was going. Right? He didn't necessarily have this measuring stick of even to know what to measure it against.
He was just obedient.
He was just
right?
obedient. And God gave him the promise that his descendants would be like that, the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky.
Yeah.
Abraham never got to see the full fulfillment. He simply welcomed it. He released the outcome. He was accredited as being a friend of God. And the reason why is because he simply trusted God with the outcome. He trusted God for the provision. And so as a couple today, what is it that he's calling you to? Where is it that he wants you to kind of do the shrug off the shoulder, resist the temptation to pick it up and own it, and simply entrust him and believe him for it? Isaiah 66:2 says this.
I love this.
"These are the ones I look on with favor."
Stop. This is for you. Don't miss it. All right, read again.
Yeah, these are the ones I look on with favor, those who are humble and contrite in spirit and who tremble at my word. There becomes this place where, like God whispered to me, Julie, I never called you to be successful. I called you to be obedient. There's freedom there, folks. And so what is it that he's calling you to that you can put your hand to together as a couple, as a family, to be obedient to?
Can I talk? Let's break down humility for just a little bit.
Absolutely.
This is something actually that we've studied quite a bit. I remember a conversation, I've had a few conversations actually with folks about this idea of humility. And I remember one response one time was, well, most of the people that I know that are quite successful have quite a pedigree, and a big bank account and, et cetera, all of those, again, those kind of worldly standards of success.
Right.
He said, they're not particularly humble people, So again, I think that we can sometimes, if we're not careful, we can really confuse our standard of success with God's standard of success, first of all. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to make good money and that we shouldn't try to produce good results. That's not at all it. But when we speak about humility, love, why don't you, in fact, I won't steal your thunder on this because I know it's something that you like to talk about or something that you like to really live from. What is it? What does humility mean to you in your life? How do you conduct yourself in humility, yet at the same time continue to go for the gusto and work hard and and try to provide great results at the same time? Where's the balance in all of that?
Well, that's very kind of you. I love what I think it was Charles Spurgeon said, either him or Oswald Chambers, but he said, humility is the proper estimation of oneself. And for me, it's not thinking of myself too much, and it's not thinking of myself too little. When there's a false humility, it's like, oh, no.
False humility is not humility at all. In fact,
No, it's
false
pride.
humility is rooted in pride. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there,
yeah.
but you just hit a nerve with me because I operated in false humility a lot. It's like, oh, no, not me. You know what I mean? Like really pushing off compliments and things of that nature. And it's not actually attractive at all. And it's not becoming, right? So anyway, go ahead.
No, it's. I'm saying I'm waving hi to a bunch of people, but it's the proper estimation. It's saying, okay, God, well, here's the gift that you've given me.
Right.
How do you want to use this gift to expand your kingdom? What do you want to do with this? And so for me, it's simply hearing what God has said, and then aligning my life to follow after it. A broken or a contrite spirit is one that says, I know I can't do it in my own power, but I do want to align myself and partner with you, and will be obedient to whatever it is that you're calling me to. Humility is, in my mind, preferring one another's needs over my own, preferring one another's agenda over my own, to realize that I probably do, unfortunately, in many occasions have an agenda, and taking that agenda and saying, okay, God, here's my agenda, but I give it back to you, and just understanding my own human frailty, my own human tendency still does oftentimes shift to that measuring stick that the world tries to put on me. And so humility to me is saying, oh God, help me. Oh God, help me to have your mindset and to walk in that place and that posture of living to the audience of one, living for his approval, coming back to that mailer story that we opened up with, of just saying, okay, God, what is it how can I be obedient to you in this day and release everything else that would try to steal my joy?
Yeah, I think for me, I could summarize my thoughts on humility.
I was really wordy with that.
Well, no,
how
were
would
good.
you summarize it?
You were good. Well, no, I think it was good. I think what you said is really good. So I think for me, when I think about humility in the proper terms that serve me and serve my community and such in the way that I think that is proper, is just understanding that everything that I have really is a gift. My
so
gifts,
good.
my talents, my provisions, I ought not take too much credibility for that, because God will, he blesses the just and the unjust. He reigns on the just and the unjust. Scripture tells us that. So again, I think one of the greatest things that help give me peace in humility is really just giving even my gifts and the thoughts that I have or the actions that I take, and giving credit back to God for that. It just helps me kind of understand that I need to be desperate for God in the good times, and I need to be just as desperate for God in the not so good times, because my desperation is not like it doesn't mean that we have to be in peril. Desperation for God means a true understanding of how much I need Him always, no matter what the circumstances are, whether they feel good or whether they don't feel good. I still need Him tremendously on any given at any given moment and any given time.
So hey, I have a favor to ask of you. A couple things. One, let us know what from this time together today blessed you, that you want us to pray for you about. A lesson that God's teaching you as a couple or as an individual, that you want to really concretely put in your soul. As people read back through this, it's going to bless them too. So what's one thing that God's teaching you that you want to hold fast to? And then the third thing, would you go to our site, marriedforapurpose.com. Go to the top right hand corner, you'll see this About Us, but underneath the About Us, you'll see the word vision. Click on that vision and scroll down to about the middle of our written vision out. And as you would think of it, would you pray for us about those things? Asking God for Him to fulfill the very promises that He's whispered in our spirit, the things, ooh, there was a lizard back
He
there.
ran behind us, I saw that.
And the vision that God's entrusted us so that we can walk it out in the fullness that He's called us to. And then finally, one more. What if you've been blessed by this, would you share it forward, start your own watch party, or just share it as a post on your page, and encourage the couples around you to lean into God in this season.
Hey, we'll catch you on Wednesday morning. Have a great week. You have to shut that one out first.
There we go.